There's a thing with technology, and we know it from our phones, mass customisation. So we might both have iPhones, but how we operate them is entirely differently because of the apps that we put on.
Sure.
And I think it's that excites me, that we can provide healthcare to the masses, but in a personalised and targeted way, so it's best for them. That's what excites me.
I'm Dr. Louise Massara, and this is the Future Health Podcast. If you work in the healthcare industry, you are no stranger to change. And some of the most significant change on the horizon is digital. It's expensive, it's complex, and oftentimes invisible. While all transformation projects come up against barriers, are there ways to better prep ourselves for the inevitable friction? Are you a change champion, or are you a Chardonnay terrorist? Dr. Natalie Smith is an associate professor in practice. Her PhD explored the governance of digital health transformations, which was inspired by her work as a risk advisory partner at Deloitte and establishing the Chief Delivery Officer function in Queensland Health. She now gets to, as she describes, eat her own ice cream as a non-executive director for Uniting Care Queensland, for Queensland Treasury Corporation, and as a member of the Digital Committee for St John of God Health. Welcome, Natalie. So I've described in the introduction that we're going to talk about transformational friction. Mm-hmm. Can you help set the scene for us? What sort of transformations are we talking about?
So the transformations I'm particularly interested are in digital health. That is what motivated me to do research in this topic. I've come from a background in, we're calling it digital transformation now, but really we've been transforming industries over the whole of my career. My focus and my interest is in digital health transformation. So changing from paper-based models of care to one that is digitally enabled and, transforming the whole way we do health.
Natalie, you've coined the phrase transformational friction. Mm-hmm. Or another way, just for the punter on the road, is another way of thinking about that, just essentially thinking about the barriers to change, or am I simplifying it?
The barriers to change is certainly part of it, but I guess when I think of barriers, I think of something static that you find a way over it and then you're in the clear, you're free to go. What I found, and I guess a bit to my surprise, felt I'd been bumping into it in the dark the whole time that I'd been involved in digital transformation, was just that there are these opposing forces at play the whole time you're doing a transformation, and so hence the term transformation friction.
Okay, so are there inherent forces at play in all transformations, or does the scale make a difference, the industry? How sort of consistent are these transformational frictions?
Good question. And they're inherent in every transformation. And in fact, scholars have known this for some time. And that's sort of been interesting as well, that we're less aware of it as practitioners. But they are inherent in any transformation. What is different from industry to industry and from transformation type to transformation type is just the extent of those forces. But I think the forces themselves are constant.
Okay, we better give some people at home some context. Now, let's talk about some examples of what these points of friction might be.
So I think in any transformation there can be structural forces to do with, it's all to do with the new and the old. You're going from an old to a new. So there can be structural forces at play, the way the organisation's structured, your KPIs, the policies, etc. There can be people. It can be the culture, it can be capabilities. It can be political. There are different reasons people are motivated to embark on a particular transformation. There can be a rub between those. So there's some of the forces at play in terms of some of the tensions. So these are the opposing forces that come into play in every change, I think, to more or less extent. You have this tension between what needs to stay the same and what needs to change. The resources you've got, the resources you need for the transformation, and the ones you're going to need afterwards. How do you fly the plane and fix it at the same time? So there's some of the forces that are at play.
So it sounds like our task here isn't to eliminate the frictions, but more to sort of anticipate and navigate around them. Is that fair?
That's fair to say.
We like to solve problems here. So we're not solving a problem, we're mitigating it.
Yeah, and I think the term, and I've grappled with the right term a bit, is to navigate. So I don't think you can resolve them totally. You can probably, and I think you can create frictionless environments, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I think of consultants, one of the examples in my research where the consultants sat in this, glass-walled room and did the transformation, of course, spectacularly unsuccessful when that was translated to the business. That was probably frictionless, but didn't achieve what it was meant to. So I think we need to have, some of this friction, but our job as leaders and within an organisation, I think, is more to navigate it than to hope it can go away.
Okay, well, that's a great transition, because I was going to really ask, is it someone's job in the organisation? Is it the leader's job? Is it a sort of a specific team with a specific name, innovation, transformation in their title? Whose job is it to be aware of these frictions and, as you say, try to navigate the organisation through them?
One of the big learnings for me, and there are different models of leadership, as you know, transformational leadership, leaders where you have, the superhero with a cape on their back that sort of, heads off into the distance and hopes people will follow. It's not that. And in fact, that analogy of it takes a village to raise a child, I think it's the same for transformation. So I found it was more a leadership ecosystem, and that the more aligned a leadership ecosystem was vertically, so from, the board through to the executive team and the management, and then horizontally across, the different leadership levels, the better and faster change could go.
Are there people who are most impactful in acknowledging the ecosystem? Are there still sort of pain points where if we haven't got the right person in the right role, we're in trouble?
Yes, there is. You're right. And in fact, that was something I prosecuted quite a bit. If we've got this leadership ecosystem, do we need accountable owners? Do we need a single person that's accountable? And to date, I would have to say, yes, we still need that. We need that single person that is accountable. Then I tried to delve into, so what is that? Is it a particular role? Is it a particular capability? And the only commonality I could get across the different transformation types was that they needed to be credible and have, I guess, legitimacy or respected within, that ecosystem of leaders.
We might come back to the leaders, but there are other characters in a transformation or a sort of a change initiative. You've got your champion and you've got your first follower and your early adopters, but there probably are some other characters too. Could you flesh that out for us a little bit? Who should we be looking out for?
Well, there's two particularly I think are worth looking out for, particularly in the health context. The first is type B leaders. So when we think of transformation, I think we're often looking at the type A leaders, that solo superhero type I talked about. Particularly in the health context, it's more the type B leaders. And so they might be more quietly working away in the background, but highly respected by their team, listen to others, bring people along with them, coach, mentoring, etc. Those type B leaders, we need more of them in the context of transformation. And they're the ones that we should be selecting, I guess, for clinical leadership roles, as we're doing these types of transformations. The other one still makes me laugh, and it was one of the CEOs I interviewed came up with this term of Chardonnay terrorists. And what he meant by that was that, you can be the CEO and you're giving this, grand speech about the transformation, and everyone's nodding their head and, clap, clap, it's all really good. And then someone will come up to you at the social function afterwards and say, yeah, I get what you're doing, but, other people, and sort of undermine either, to your face, but behind, when everyone else is not there, or even when you're not there and sort of undermining behind the scenes. So those Chardonnay terrorists, and I think that term resonated with everyone else I talked to, are dangerous. And really one of the big differences between successful and unsuccessful transformations was the ability and the courage to disarm the Chardonnay terrorists.
That's so interesting. I think, health leadership, we often spend the high proportion of our day not necessarily on those that are effectively on the page and working towards a solution, but managing sometimes the small proportion of people who might be engaging in some of these behaviours. How do you disarm the terrorist?
Interesting question. And of course, in a government organisation, health organisation, that can be less It can be harder than it is in some others. But there are ways of doing it. I think given, for the leaders that are doing it well, some of the things that they were doing was incentivising good behaviour and collaboration. So in a sense, not giving oxygen to the ones that are making the noise. It's not to listen to them, because sometimes there can be some merit and some good reasons that they might be objecting to the change. But I think pushing past that to see if it is just that they look good in the old system and are going to be undermined, or perhaps won't feel as strong in the new system, perhaps, talking into those fears a bit. But I think mostly that focus on the people that are championing change, that are demonstrating the good behaviours. And then that 80%, you talked about the champions and the early adopters, that 80% can be pulled in either direction. So if you're giving your attention to the 10% that are demonstrating the right behaviours, the other 80 tend to follow that.
Natalie, what you say about type B leaders in health, I mean, this is a really interesting thing, because if we think back to even how people enter health as a career path, we're sort of funneling one group of people all the way from the beginning. When we think about the future of what our needs are for our health workforce, having identified that this is a core group that really can support these sort of transformations, how far back do we have to go to look at our system and make sure we're getting the right participants right from the start?
Gosh, that's a really big
curly question. Yeah,
it is. But I think they're there. It's just sometimes they're not as obvious. I mean, it is such a diverse workforce, isn't it, in health? So I think they're there. I think it's not just in health as well, but I think it's more we do need to think about these type B leaders more, and look out for them on the way through, and give them the opportunities rather than being attracted to the squeaky wheel or the one that's making the noise.
So we've got that leadership ecosystem. We've got the little troublemakers over here.
Yep.
There are a lot of us that are just part of a transformation. What role do we need to play to assist in the success of these transformations, and how do we empower that collection of staff to feel that they're on this journey?
Yeah, again, an excellent question, and I think it's what the leadership ecosystem notion plays into. Everyone plays a role in a transformation. It's not done by one particular person or group, and I think that's particularly the case in health, which has a distributed power base relative to other industries. The people at the front line are critical to the transformation working successfully. So as to how to empower those people, I think there's a lot we can do when, in a board or in an executive role, we can give them pride in what we're doing, give them a reason to want to change what they're doing. They're good people that want to do the right thing by patients, by carers, by the teams they're leading. So give them a good reason as to why we're doing the transformation and how it's going to help them. Listen to what's getting in their road, what's a force that's pulling them away from being able to do that. Try and help remove some of those and navigate some of those forces. When it's a digital transformation, giving them access to the technology early, being open with them that it's not going to solve everything. In fact, some things are going to go backwards, but trust them with that knowledge. So I think empowering them is in a sense about trusting them to be able to give them early access and information, and then to listen to what they're finding and adapting the course accordingly.
Digital transformation tends to have a significant time frame attached to it. It's a long process. And while there's sort of sometimes a bursts and flurries of visible progress, in chief executive-led environments where there's multiple pools of focus all the time, how do we retain those sort of core leadership people really engaged in the ongoing digital transformation? Because it feels like, there's the front end and the back end, but I don't know how we often seem to then pass the baton in a lot of situations to a sort of a digital team, and maybe don't maintain that sort of finger on the pulse from the top. Is that a tension? Is that a problem, or is
Oh,
that fine?
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, about the tension of flying the plane and fixing it. And so that's a huge problem. If you're an executive, it's a busy enough role. So to embark on a digital transformation, and you're probably feeling uncomfortable about having the digital skills. I think most of us would be honest and say we haven't grown up with some of those technologies, so that's a bit daunting. So you're probably feeling a bit very comfortable operating a large organisation, but to transform it, probably you're busy and the skill set. But it is critical to be involved, and that involvement can speed up the transformation. So part of the irony is the less you're involved, probably the higher the friction and the longer it's going to take. So that was one of the surprises to me, and where the notion of friction came up was that for some of the CEOs of successful transformations, they realised they could go faster or had gone faster when they were doing a subsequent transformation.
Okay. And that was a surprise to them?
It was a surprise to them, and it was also a surprise to me because, as you said, we sort of expect transformations to take a long time, and they do, but I think getting that upfront investment of time to get the right things in place, alignment of the leadership team, courage to disarm the Chardonnay terrorists, inspiring people with what it is that we're doing, that upfront investment can pay huge dividends in terms of the time that it takes to do things.
So is this where that concept of noses in,
fingers
out comes into play?
Yeah, so that's a mantra that we've had, particularly in Australia, but in others in the corporate governance world, that for boards the job is to be noses in, fingers out. And yeah, I think we need to rethink that, or at least have more nuance to it. The noses in, fingers out makes sense in a stable organisation when you've got defined roles and defined structures and touch points between groups and the functions and processes are defined. But in a true transformation, that's all up for grabs. And so the organisation needs, I guess, the influence of the board and the executive team to be setting some of the ground rules around culture, to be changing the structure if it needs, or the policies or the KPIs, to be giving a grace over the performance metrics, while you're undergoing a transformation. So I think the noses in, fingers out is actually a bit dangerous in the context of a transformation.
I wonder if it was, that there was an attempt to set the target and then give some freedom and flexibility to those doing, that was sort of encased in that idea.
Yep.
But yet, as you say, in terms of your work around friction, if they are fingers out, then there isn't that ability from a leadership perspective to recognise a change needs to be made, or there needs to be a shift or a flexibility, as you say. Without the fingers in to turn the ship around at key points, then, as you say, the length of time to solution might really,
because the friction's high and
correct.
You haven't got those things in place. Yeah, I think there's a difference between, and certainly it's a tension. As a board member, you don't want to be interfering, you don't want to be overly involved, and I'm not suggesting that, but you do need to invest in it. And probably the best, I was talking to the chair of a board of, a big health service that had just undergone a massive digital transformation that had gone, for the most part successfully, and asked him, if and how it had changed what he did. And he said it changed everything. And I said, what did it change? And he said, well, it changed who I had on the board. It changed who I had as the CEO. And he said, I went to more morning teas and coffees than a man my age and weight should do. But that gave me a sense of what was going on. Now, I could have really saved, 4 years of eating baked beans during my PhD if I'd listened to him. But in essence, that was it. It wasn't that he was doing the job of the executive, but he was creating the right environment for the executive to be able to do the executive and the organisation to do the digital transformation.
In looking at all of these various organisations' transformations, how adaptable does a leader, whether it's at a board level or an executive level or a team leader level, need to bring to the project? I feel like sometimes in health we make a big investment. We've got a program plan, and it's very hard for us, even if we see the iceberg coming,
Yep.
To stop,
Yeah.
adapt, change. Was that
Yeah.
was that something you
there's
were
a couple
witness
of
to?
Yeah, there's a couple of things at play there. I think one is government typically, and I think to do with our authorising environment, etc., to be able to delegate, you need defined processes. And we sort of rely heavily on processes to be able to delegate authority safely. That can be problematic. And then that's, so you can be following a process, the outcome's going to be poor, but, we're all incentivised, I guess, to follow that process. That's one thing. The second thing is projects are very process-oriented as well, to do with where they've originated from in engineering and technical domains where you can sort of isolate a project from the rest of the organisation. So we have a business case, for example, where, we set in concrete at the start how much it's going to cost, the benefits, risks. If you're doing something truly transformational, you can't predict some of those things. So adaptability is really key. And in fact, there were 4 key differences for successful and unsuccessful transformations. And one of those 4 was about adaptive monitoring. So monitoring what's going on and adapting the course of the change. And that requires a certain amount of humility,
Sure.
that at times you have to say, yeah, we got that wrong.
Yeah.
That isn't working. We need to adjust the way we're doing things. So, yeah, you're spot on. We can be too process-centric. We need to be able to adapt if it's not going to achieve the right outcome.
So if we are future-proofing the next round of digital transformations, are there any additional attributes that you would like to... You're doing the recruitment for the next round of leaders, chiefs in health.
Yep.
Are there any specific attributes which we haven't really needed in the past or haven't come to the fore in the past that really we're going to see surge in the next sort of 20 years? Does anything come to mind?
Wow. Yeah, it's topical. The ability to inspire people with a vision of where we're heading, that gets people wanting, the discretionary effort and that they're wanting to be involved, that narrative that makes people want to get out of bed in the morning. But then that humility and self-awareness when they've got it wrong to be able to say, I got that wrong and we need to adjust. So I think there's an authenticity with that. The good news, I think, though, for digital transformation is it doesn't require you to be particularly technical.
Well, I was going to actually ask that because we're probably in a transition point where we have a group of emerging leaders who are probably closer to being tech natives than you or I might be.
Yep.
Part of our effort has to be trying to understand and learn a language every time someone's telling us about a new amazing... Well, I should only speak for myself. You may be expert
no,
in
it's
this.
the same. It's hard to keep up.
Do you know what I mean? It's a whole other discipline that we're having to add into our portfolio at a later point in career. But we're probably seeing already our 20 and 30-year-olds who are much more comfortable and familiar in a technologically advanced, digitally enabled space. I wonder if, although you say it's not critical, I wonder if the reality is with so much in health, so many of the opportunities and advantages being in the space of technology, whether actually it's going to become a bit more of a core component of a leader's arsenal.
Yes, and it's a good pickup, and it's less about the digital, the technology itself. I find it hard to keep up with, and I defy anyone to keep up with the pace of change in what's happening. There is a mindset, though, that is different, and there are some things that are innate to technology that make it different in how we govern to how we've governed previously. So, for example, it's harder to see progress with the digital transformation than it is for an infrastructure-based transformation. So there are different skills we probably need to bring to bear. The digital natives themselves, some of those, struggle with some of the structures that you need in place for digital transformation or anything digitally enabled to work, because they might have grown up using technology, but they're not aware of what's under the covers for it to work well. So I think we've all got some learning to do. So I think it's, going back to some of those attributes, it's being, having a vision, but being open to that ecosystem around you and the skills different people bring to bear for that to come to bear.
If we throw to sort of 10, 15 years in the future, and the slew of digital transformations, which are sort of partway through now, all come to bear fruit.
Yep.
What's that going to mean for the health workforce? Like, how is that going to transform their actual working life?
Yeah, well, for a start, I think I would like to think that flexible work practices become much more prevalent. Digital can break down some of those temporal and physical boundaries that have made it difficult to provide good healthcare. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited when I think about, and I don't know the answer to this, but when I think about, the putting in core banking systems, as I was in the 90s, and the difference that that's made to banking, where, we don't go into a physical bank anymore. If you told us that 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have believed you. We don't take travellers' checks. We don't even use cash even locally, when we go overseas. The massive change that's made to how we transact. What will that look like in healthcare? And
what will it look like?
What I hope it looks like is that, and part of my role, I have the privilege of going out to some of our most remote Indigenous communities. What I hope it looks like is that we can take health education into those communities and connect going to school with looking after elders, rather than having to bring people out of community into the metros. So I hope it helps with our training in health. And then, I hope it empowers people within their communities to look after their own health better when they do need to go into a metro for the stuff that you can only do in a large metro hospital, that they're connected with their health carers, and those health carers are connected with their community so they know what's going on and can provide a better level of health care. There's a thing with technology, and we know it from our phones, mass customisation. So we might both have iPhones, but how we operate them is entirely differently because of the apps that we put on.
Sure.
And I think it's that excites me, that we can provide healthcare to the masses, but in a personalised and targeted way, so it's best for them. That's what excites me.
It's a good vision. Just changing things up a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of outsourcing when we go back to these big projects. Health, we've had a bit of a history of using consulting firms and the like, especially in this digital transformation space.
Yep.
What are the benefits of that model, and what are some of the perhaps risks or disadvantages that you've identified?
Gosh, I've sat on a number of sides. From
Of
my
this coin
background,
you have,
you would see that I've spent a lot of time in tech consulting, and for the big consulting firms. And I confess, I get angry when I see the level of money waste on contractors and consultants. And I understand there's been a need, partly it's our HR systems that don't keep pace with the supply and demand in digital. But yeah, I do think some of the capabilities we have over outsourced, and I think some of those, the nature of tech is that it's highly interconnected. So systems integration, for example, is something that we outsource because, when they're hard skills to get. Architecture is something that we outsource. But I know from one of the committees that I sit on, one of their big learnings after a system implementation was that only they know their systems, only they know their people. They're the ones that can best do systems integration. So I think some of those core capabilities that relate to how that interconnectedness of system to system, system to people, that's something we need to own as an organisation. We can outsource parts of it, but that's that tension between the resources we've got and the resources we need. I think there are some that we need to invest in our health system to be able to pull off these transformations well.
We are definitely a big investor in technology, and this is going to get become a bigger and bigger space. And I think for as many transformations that can have sort of claimed success, we're all probably aware of an underutilized system, a sort of a white elephant that didn't quite measure up. I mean, part of that might be expectation. And as you sort of, I think you mentioned right at the beginning, sometimes we're expecting to sort of switch on a button with a new system and it's going to transform my life. And the disappointment of the reality of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, can lead to sort of a lack of success in the overall program. But if we're going to take an eye to sort of maximising value in health, and if we're going to be conscious of avoiding waste, part of the learning has to be sort of avoiding repeating the errors of the past. How good are we as a health ecosystem, forget the leader ecosystem, how good are we at sharing the learnings, the stories? Do we lift each other up in this space, or have we not got that right?
I would argue we haven't got that right, and that was why I did the research, because I was looking at come up leading in projects and then leading them myself, and then was in the position where I'm looking at other projects, and you can see some spectacular failures and spectacular successes. And while I have talked about the leadership ecosystem, I could see that the role of the board and the CEO executive team were critical. And what was that? What did they need to do? So I think a lot of our tech failures have come from a couple of things. One is, the not investing, handing it over to the CIO or the digital team or whatever. So it's been a technical implementation without the change. The second is our methods and tools, as I said, have come from this engineering background where we built widgets. Most technology now, we're buying it. We can't change it. So we're still, using those processes that we had for building widgets. We can spend, I think, too long in requirements definition, even the procurement process, when there's probably only a couple on the market that are available anyway. We'd be better spending our time working through. Of course, it's not going to do everything as well as we used to. There are going to be things that it does better, things that that aren't going to be as good. Being open and honest of it, to your expectations. So I think, part of it's the investment and who's doing it. Second is our processes and then the expectations that we've set because of the processes we have.
From your research, is there an industry that you think, hey, health, get a clue, come over here and look at what these guys are doing as you're, planning your procurements or your decisions over the next 10, 15 years. Here's a group that are ahead of us in their thinking.
One of the things we need to get over in health a bit is we all think we're special, and it's funny, I've been talking to some regulators.
We are very special.
And we are, but we're not that special.
Sure.
And yes, it's a more federated and distributed model, and yes, the stakeholder environment is more complex. Yet, there are changes I do for how, where we initiate digital transformation from, and, where it sits in the organisation, the governance around it. And we can learn from from other industries on that. But I think there's still, in every industry, there are some that do it well and some that don't. So, I don't think anyone's got the secret sauce yet.
If we went and talked to some of the frontline clinicians, there'll be a range of tales that we're told about their experience in any of these change projects. I reflect on what you said earlier about connecting the user, as the clinician, to a story around pride and their own purpose and the patient and their outcome. I think there's such a powerful story to be told there, and it may be one of the ways to win over staff who, to be fair to the staff, can be inundated with change. But it's that piece sometimes maybe we don't do well enough.
Yeah, and we don't. And particularly, and this is where health is special, maybe just not as unique as we think. But people are attracted to health because they care for people. And there's nothing worse you can do, I think, for people that are motivated to care for people if you're getting in the road of them being able to do that. And when I look at some of the ways, and I know it's happening even in the organisations I'm involved with, when they bring in digital, they're running two systems concurrently. It actually adds to people's already busy workload. that's not okay, or it should only be a short-term thing. A couple of things I would say there. I think some of the systems that we're putting in now, when I look back at banking, some of those core systems, they are really clunky, and it was only over time. Those core systems, for the most part, are still there, but we got better user interfaces, and, a lot of that complexity is hidden. We're still working that out in health. So I think setting that expectation that, this is going to take many years to get right, but involving people in that innovation, I think is critical. But yeah, just hearing their pain on that.
Well, to get the value out of the investment, we need the buy-in of the end user. It's so critical.
Yeah.
Do you think we're involving our clinical workforce deeply enough and early enough? Do they have time? It's that constant.
It's a challenge, isn't it? It's attention, because people are busy, and it's a people industry, isn't it? So you've got to have a pretty compelling argument to say, this is actually going to help you do your job better. You can't involve everyone all at once, but I think it is getting, some of those type B leaders involved earlier, setting up, configuring things so that workflows can happen, so they know where the pain points are going to be and can warn people, can be prioritising, what might be a priority for me as an administrator in health could be very different to someone on the front line, but I need to respect that and listen to that and act on that, even if I might see something as more important. If that's, important to the bulk of clinicians, then that's something, that we should be working on. So,
do you face the challenge put to you that we have a tension between digital transformation in health, perhaps usurping or getting in the way of the people element of health that's so critical to the care of our patients? Most of us come into health, wanting to be at the bedside. And I think the robot army is something we can put down as something not likely to occur. But there are fears amongst the workforce. How do you address those concerns?
Partly it's just my own experience that I've been in technology for a long time, 40 years. I've seen jobs change, and even in the tech industry, punch card operators, they no longer exist, all sorts of things. It's not taken away jobs. I've recently done a postdoc in AI and trust. AI's not taking away jobs. In fact, it's creating jobs in terms of getting the data right and the monitoring after it, all sorts of things as well. So the first thing I would say is that I haven't seen technology, and the evidence would suggest that as well. But, I'm aware from sitting on boards, 80% of our cost is in people. It is people that provide care. It's a hard sell, and rightly, to be spending on technology when it could be spent on frontline care. It's attention. It's also attention in the private hospital space where I work, that, the private hospitals are operating at a deficit. How do you invest in technology when you've got, massive deficits? These are wicked problems, but by the same token, I don't see how we can address the demand issues we have in healthcare if we don't invest in technology. I just can't see how we can have equitable, accessible, reaching to the extremities of Australian need in healthcare, how we can do that without digital. So it's a tension, but it's something that we have to embrace, I think.
Natalie Smith, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Louise. It's been great.
The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of myself and today's guest, and do not necessarily reflect the position of New South Wales Health. Any content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as endorsement or approval by the organisation. New South Wales Health does not endorse any products, services or companies mentioned in this content.